Hi, this is New Time on Silkway TV channel. We introduce you with the most visible news and important events that happens throughout this week in Kazakhstan and Central Asia. More details on politics, economy, social and cultural life with opinions from the most recognizable experts of Kazakhstan and world. I'm Ainura Mangali and this is what you'll see today. Major political event of this autumn, New York hosted the 78th session of the UN General Assembly. What was the message of Kazakhstan? Promoting multilateralism values. Why is it important in modern geopolitics? Exclusive interview with the head of Kazakhstan Institute of Strategic Studies, Mr. Yerkin Tukumov. The platform for geek culture lovers. What does Michael Rooker from Guardians of the Galaxy movie think about the future of creative industries and what impressed him in Astana? And let us start from the major political event that took place in New York this week. Yes, this is the 78th UN General Assembly, the platform which became a common ground for global debates on a range of the topics related to security, climate change and combating poverty and scarcity. Leaders of the countries encouraged to jointly address and act upon some of the most visible challenges that humanity faces today. President of Kazakhstan, the country that has been promoting fundamental values of multilateralism for years, participated in a series of high-level meetings in New York during his working visit to USA. My colleague Kunsaya Kurimet was in New York as well. She collected the most important fragments of President Tokayev's speech at the UN General Assembly.
As a co-moderator, President Tokayev took part in UN Sustainable Development Summit. The leader of Kazakhstan addressed some major challenges mankind faces today on its way to sustainable environment, emphasizing that urgent joint actions are needed, as well as common commitment into building a sustainable society.
The principles of sustainable development have become the foundation of our national strategies and programs. Today, we are heavily investing in a sustainable future. 80% of the state budget is synchronized with the SDGs. We ensure universal access to free education and healthcare. A new social code has strengthened protection of vulnerable groups.
Kazakhstan is a promoter of multilateralism values in Central Asia, experts say. There are threats to its value, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev added through the 78th session of the UN General Assembly.
Today, humanity faces enormous shifts unseen in a century and has entered yet another period of geopolitical confrontation. The essence of the threat comes from the simultaneous erosion of fundamental principles of international law embodied in the Charter of the United Nations. The displacement of these pillars puts an increasingly heavy burden on the existing structure of international relations and creates confrontations.
Non-compliance with international legal documents can lead to a point of no return, the president of Kazakhstan underlined. The reforms are needed in the structure of the United Nations itself, he stressed. Otherwise, it will be not possible to cope with the global challenges.
We also need to think about a better global food security system. Nearly 10% of the world's population faced hunger last year. We must boost voluntary information exchange on food security, including volumes of production and the export or import of food products. In concert, we must enable the transparent tracking of funding from the international community in response to food crises.
President Tokayev also stated that Kazakhstan is ready to act as a regional hub for food supplies as well as logistics center of Central Asia. The so-called Middle Corridor can increase trade turnover between countries, also adopting principles of connectivity in practice. Climate change issues are also present in the region. Water deficit, as Kazakhstan president stated earlier, could become a cause of climate migration in Central Asia in years to come.
Central Asia is one of its front lines. Even if we successfully limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees by 2030, which looks increasingly unlikely, we will experience between 2.5 degrees of temperature rise in Central Asia.
In his speech, President of Kazakhstan also paid attention to security issues in Central Asia. This is not possible to talk about prosperity in Central Asia without creating stability in Afghanistan, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev said. Therefore, Kazakh leader once again called on all countries to support the initiative to create a UN regional hub for Central Asia and Afghanistan in Almaty. It's important to know that a number of key agreements have been signed, under which Kazakhstan will receive not just investments, but can also open several regional hubs in the humanitarian, financial and digital areas. Kunsuya Kurmet, Asılbek Kuspanov, Maksat Tastanbekov, Silkway, New York.
SDG Summit in the framework of the UN General Assembly has become a platform where representatives of the UN member states, public and private sectors, as well as civil society gathered to signal their commitment to a new global agenda. What sustainable development goals are aiming for? Baljan Samigulina has details.
United Nations Sustainable Development Goals are a universal call to action that unites 193 countries around the world. 8 years ago, nations made commitment to build equal opportunities for each individual by 2030. The goals primarily aimed to eradicate extreme poverty and hunger. However, Western leaders defended slow progress to end global inequality. At a special summit in New York, majority of sides acknowledged there was little chance that the ambitious goals will be met on schedule. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres even called for a global rescue plan.
Yet today, only 15% of the targets are on track, and many are going in reverse. Instead of leaving no one behind, we risk leaving the SDGs behind. So, Excellencies, the SDGs need a global rescue plan.
In this regard, Head of UN listed 6 main tasks which international community at this stage should act upon. First of all, to take measures to combat hunger. Secondly, to accelerate the transition to renewable energy sources. Thirdly, to better come up to an active use of advantages and opportunities of digitalization. Fourth, to improve the quality of education. Fifth, to provide people with decent work and social protection. And sixth, and finally, to solve issues jointly related to climate change, ending up air pollution and loss of biodiversity. Antonio Guterres proposed at least a $500 billion stimulus for reaching sustainable development goals in the world. This in particular can help oppose poverty and hunger on a global scale, as well as assist developing countries to address issues related to deficit of sources on the regional and local levels. Baljan Samigulina, Silkway TV channel.
Earlier this week, we invited UN Resident Coordinator for Kazakhstan, Michaela Friberg-Story, to our studio to know details and agenda of SDG Summit in New York and also to know her vision on the future of cooperation with Kazakhstan. Please watch the fragment of conversation right now. Hello, Michaela. Thanks for joining us today. So my first question is about SDG Summit in New York. We can call it a very important mile in reinforcing commitment to 2030 agenda. But what is on agenda right now? And let us do a quick reality check. What are the main challenges world leaders address today? Why is it important in the divisive world we live right now to call out for a cooperative work, and how initiatives sounded by world leaders will be promoted next, through what kind of mechanisms and tools?
Well, if you look at what is happening right now, some will say that we have advanced, and yes, we have. But we're still only looking at some 12% of all the SDGs indicators that are de facto advancing. we are sliding backwards on the number of issues. And even where we are advancing, such as on gender equality and women's empowerment, is going so slowly that it's going to take us 300 years if we don't speed up.
So long.
And we're seeing that unless we advance poverty reduction, we're going to have almost 580 million people living in extreme poverty when we get to 2030. We are risking future generations, not only through poverty, but also through not addressing the climate threats that we are seeing. So we count on the leaders today in New York to adopt a political declaration that will reinvigorate and revitalize political solidarity and commitment to sustainable development and human rights. So here in Kazakhstan, for example, we are over 25 up to 27 UN entities engaging with Kazakhstan, being a partner of Kazakhstan to advance sustainable development. But we need more. We need a stronger commitment from national authorities. I'm not talking specifically about Kazakhstan there, because we see a lot of engagement.
Globally. Yes.
Globally. But what we also need is that the richer part of the world is actually supporting the poorer part of the world even more, much more than what they do today. The Secretary General calls for an additional contribution of $500 billion a year. And we can do this by leaning forward and making better use of the financial instruments that are at hand, but also unlocking the potential of the private sector. That means to look at the energy sector, at the education sector, at just and social protection, looking at gender issues, looking at education, and looking at the digitalization and how we can leapfrog development with digital transformation. And this is one of the things where Kazakhstan has really made strong progress. The digital family card, for example, is one of those digital tools that allows to reach those that are at risk of being left behind.
Right, talking about Kazakhstan a little bit, resources deficit, we're talking about water, electricity, natural resources are one of the key challenges this region and Kazakhstan as a country faces right now, not mentioning some global challenges like climate change, food security and so on. How international cooperation, in your point of view, including through UN platforms, can assist in solving these particular issues?
If we talk about the potential for drought in Kazakhstan, that will impact the wheat harvest. That could impact the earnings for farmers. And it can impact those markets that are dependent on Kazakh exports globally. So everything stands together. And as the UN, we are working with every single dimension of this through our different agencies, funds and programs. Whether you talk about FAO, Food and Agriculture Organization, assisting farmers in finding the right type of crops, whether you look at the economic commissions for Europe that are really focusing on creating national platform for water dialogues, whether you talk about UNDP that has very large programs also here in Kazakhstan focusing on strengthening regional work, or UNICEF looking at the children's dimension.
How do you see, in general, Kazakhstan's role, Kazakhstan's contribution in the implementation of the goals of sustainable development?
Well, there's of course two avenues. The first is to look at what Kazakhstan has achieved at home. And it is a remarkable development that Kazakhstan has undergone during the past 30 years. And that is development, and that should be recognized. That is an enormous achievement. The second track to look at is the international commitments that you see from Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan has an unwavering commitment to the UN Charter, to multilateralism and sustainable development. Kazakhstan is starting to become a donor and supporting other countries. So I think Kazakhstan really leads the way in how you can think in new dimensions to support sustainable development regionally and globally.
Will it influence our future cooperation with the UN in particular?
Well, I just assume that it's going to continue to be strong. Kazakhstan is such a strong member of the UN and with such a strong track record of success also in its multilateralism, whether you talk about the sitting on the Security Council or when it comes to having had very prominent positions in the UN system as well, I'm convinced that Kazakhstan and UN will continue to prosper in our partnership.
Thank you very much, Michaela, for your time and your answers. Thanks.
Thank you.
We very appreciate it. Let's move on. President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev participated in the first ever C5+1 summit with attendance of US President Joe Biden. The summit, where among other top attendees were leaders of 4 other Central Asian countries, was held prior 78th UN General Assembly in New York this week. High-level participants discussed possibilities for further cooperation strengthening between USA and Central Asia. Kazakh president also encouraged his American counterpart to support the idea of creation of regional hub for Central Asia and Afghanistan in Almaty. President Joe Biden in turn proposed to launch a C5+1 critical minerals dialogue to develop Central Asia's vast mineral wealth and advance critical minerals security. As the White House reported, these efforts are part of continued U.S. support of the Trans-Caspian trade route development. Investments in logistics and in infrastructure will help facilitate regional economic integration and resilience, White House reported. Let us talk more about the agenda of the first ever high-level meeting with the US President right now. My colleague from Kazakhstan Institute for Strategic Studies, Iskander Akilbayev, will share his expert view on this topic and tell us more in detail about events that dominated Central Asia the last 2 weeks. Iskander, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Ainur. I would like to explain the main points of Central Asian affairs in a while. One of the most important events that happened alongside the United Nations General Assembly was a C5+1 meeting which happened between the President of the United States, President Biden, and the leaders of Central Asian republics. The key discussion topics that were discussed or linked to the strengthening of economic cooperation, improving regional connectivity, and strengthening security ties. That was one of the key areas that was on the table during the very much symbolic discussion, because for the first time the C5+1 meeting happened on the level of the presidents. It's very much important that this C5+1 meeting happened alongside of United Nations General Assembly, because one of the key agenda was discussion of the multilateralism and the achieving of 2030 SDG agenda. So this is very much important for Kazakhstan, which is very much aspiring to become a progressive state and a leader in the Central Asian region. Kazakhstan is focusing very strong on the renewable energy, improving the human capital index, and providing the access to education to all its citizens. That's why I think in achieving SDG agenda and achieving the goals of that summit is very much important for Kazakhstan to upgrade its standards, look for the best practices, and certainly show the best practices from Kazakhstan that has been applied for a while. This is very much important for Central Asian region because it's a very young and vibrant region. That's why building connectivity and regional ties is very much strategic in this respect. The latest September meeting among the Central Asian head of states, which marked the 5th meeting along the consultative discussion of the head of state of 4 Central Asia, which happened in Dushanbe. This meeting actually was very much symbolic because it was a culmination of the project and idea which started in 2017, where the leaders of Central Asian republics agreed to bring the difference away and actually tried to unite the ideas for the better future of the region. That's why all Central Asian republics hosted the consultative meetings, and the 5th meeting happened in Dushanbe. One of the main agendas were linked to the youth politics, improving economic and trade ties, and certainly all leaders agreed that the 6th meeting is going to happen in Kazakhstan the next year. These were all events that were linked to Central Asian affairs. Thank you very much, Ainur. The floor is yours.
Iskander, thank you very much. That was senior expert of Kazakhstan Institute for Strategic Studies, Iskander Akilbayev. Kazakhstan's position within and out of Central Asia based on values of multilateralism. Why is it important to promote it in these times of geopolitical crisis? We asked the head of Kazakhstan Institute for Strategic Studies, Yerkin Tukumov. Watch our exclusive interview right now. Hello, Mr. Yerkin Tukumov. Thank you very much for joining us today. Let us start our conversation from discussing, I think, one of the most important political events that is happening right now in New York. This is SDG Summit in the framework of 78th session of the UN General Assembly. So what is on agenda this time, and why is it important for Kazakhstan to take part in this dialogue?
Well, thank you very much, Ainur, for having me. I think it is very important to explain our audience why we are participating in such events. First of all, the summit, the SDG Summit, Sustainable Development Goal Summit, is taking place right now in New York during the UN, the United Nations General Assembly. We, as Kazakhstan, participating every year it's such event, and the summit is a kind of hotspot of the high-level week of the General Assembly, and you are asking me what is the agenda this year, and the summit will point the whole way mark to reach goals of 2030 agenda and sustainable development goals. And the main objective of summit is to address complex global challenges, strengthen multilateral cooperation, and give new outlook to 2030 agenda. And as I mentioned before, Kazakhstan has been always committed to sustainable development goals agenda. For example, in 2020, July, Kazakhstan presented second voluntary national review on the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, and let me explain what the Sustainable Development Goals are.
Yes.
It's first of all implementation of best practices, best international practices to our soil, better, access for our citizens. For better education, better healthcare, environmental issues, etc. So it's improving the quality of life of our citizens, and this happening all over the world. So it's not only for Kazakhstan, but for the all countries of the world. For example, in December of 2022, Kazakh government approved Sustainable Development Goals 2023 Action Plan. This is very important, I think. And overall, the main goal, as I mentioned, to improve quality of life of citizens of Kazakhstan. And besides that, Kazakhstan actively promotes peace and cooperation in Central Asia and Afghanistan. I can say that we are the leader in the region of promoting connectivity between all Central Asian states. And I mentioned Afghanistan. Why Afghanistan? Because it's very important right now. We see the looming kind of humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan, and we are
It's also safety issues.
And we're responsible to provide Afghan citizens with enough food, with access to some minimum level of healthcare and some vaccines, etc. So we are ready to promote not only peace and cooperation within Afghanistan, but also we have to promote minimal level minimum security level of ordinary Afghan citizens.
So, as I understand, this is very important for Kazakhstan to promote sustainable development goals and to be a part of international community in that.
Yeah.
Also, Kassym-Jomart Tokayev mentioned potential of Kazakhstan of being a food hub for Eurasia, and also our commitment to support multilateralism. So, will Kazakhstan promote these values as well in the future?
Well, Kazakhstan is a well-known country, is seen as a kind of breadbasket of Central Asia region. But now we are ready to be not only a kind of a breadbasket for Central Asia region, but to expand for Eurasian region. So, and according to the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, Kazakhstan is one of the top countries alongside the United States, Australia, Brazil, and Argentina, with the most significant potential in the field of agriculture. And President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev recently set important initiatives to establish food hub along Kazakh-China border at the Horgos International Trade Center and Caspian Seafood Hub that will drastically improve trade turnover between different regions. And by becoming food hub, Kazakhstan has great potential to improve regional infrastructure, economy, and promote multilateralism in broader sense.
So we will keep doing that, and we will be promoted to our values, to our stance.
I mean, promoting Kazakhstan as a food hub not only for Central Asia but for Eurasia, makes sense with our economic modernization goals and becoming as a fully independent country in terms of our food security.
Thank you very much, Yurgen Tugulmov, for your answers and for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. I know.
Kazakhstan, for the first time, serves as a training base for the United Nations military observers. The country started to host pilot courses for Kazakh service members at the Peace Operations Center of Defense Ministry in Almaty. This remarkable development marks a crucial step of our country's commitment to global peacekeeping endeavors. Previously, similar military training was held only abroad. The course program is designed for 3 weeks. It was developed by experienced instructors who have solid peacekeeping experience abroad.
Ввиду, так сказать, актуальности, да?
Due to the urgency of sending military observers on a mission, it became necessary to organize our own courses. These courses were organized in accordance with all UN training requirements and documents. This course is a pilot for today, and we also plan to officially certify it in the Department of Peacekeeping Operations next year.
Certification will open an opportunity to train not only the military personnel of Kazakhstan, but also the military staff of other countries, including those from Central Asia. Earlier, it's worth to note, Kazakh servicemen participated in UN missions in Nepal, Western Sahara, Lebanon, the Central African Republic, and the Republic of Mali. This week was also remarkable for all geek culture lovers. Comic-Con Astana Festival gathered cosplayers, bloggers and creative youths from all over the world. We attended the event with other content creators and caught Guardians of the Galaxy film's starring actor Michael Rooker. Look what he told us about his impressions on Astana.
What can I say? It's a beautiful city. And I've been very impressed. I've been very impressed with all the people that I've met. I'm really super impressed with the architecture.
Right.
All of the new architecture that's blossoming from here in Astana, and it's interesting.
Yes.
I mean, I have never been to this part of the world before, so for me, it's really a little eye-opening, and been very pleasant.
That was Michael Rooker, who played Yondu in Guardians of the Galaxy trilogy. That's it for today. This is how we saw this week in Kazakhstan. More news and special projects about our country you can watch on Silkway TV channel. Stay tuned and see you later.